Hi, this is Mike Elliott. You're watching the Thought Leader series on the Cannabis Financial Network. In this episode, we will be talking to Mr. Mason Tvert. He's the Communications Director at the Marijuana Policy Project based in Denver, Colorado. Good afternoon, Mason. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
To start off, could you give us an overview of the Marijuana Policy Project and some of its objectives?
The Marijuana Policy Project is the nation's largest marijuana policy organization, and our mission is to end marijuana prohibition and replace it with a system in which marijuana is regulated similarly to alcohol. And we also tend to focus on ensuring people with serious illnesses who can benefit from medical marijuana have legal and safe access to it.
State marijuana policy now directly conflicts with federal policy in many cases, including states like Colorado, where the substance is legalized for both medical and recreational use. With the DOJ's recent announcements in mind, how do you see the federal landscape changing over the coming months and years?
Well, the memo issued by the Department of Justice is incredibly important because it signals for the first time in history that the federal government is respecting state-level marijuana laws and policies in some official capacity. But these laws are broken. We can't just work around our federal marijuana laws. We have to actually fix them. And so now it's up to Congress to really take action and to start taking a lot of this on. But unfortunately, Congress is not really getting much of anything done, let alone marijuana policy changes. So it's going to be a somewhat arduous road, but I think that we're going to see more and more states passing laws similar to Colorado and Washington, and more pressure on Congress to take action.
So marijuana businesses may be able to operate in many states as the federal government unofficially allows it, but banking remains a critical issue as banks are governed by strict federal laws. Without access to formal banking, many of these companies may also be keeping money off the books that's also difficult to track for authorities. How do you see this situation affecting the marijuana industry over the coming months and years?
Well, there's certainly a very serious desire to change this policy, not just among marijuana business owners who are being left to keep their potentially millions of dollars in revenue tucked away in a safe, which is incredibly dangerous, poses a lot of public safety issues. So there's a desire to change it at that level, but there's also now starting to be a significant desire among state elected officials and federal elected officials, as well as law enforcement. This was perhaps the biggest subject that was talked about during the recent Senate Judiciary Committee in Washington, D.C., is addressing this banking issue. And I think that it's going to be among the first issues that gets addressed, because even members of Congress who don't think marijuana should be legal will need to really respect the fact that in states where it is legal, there need to be banking services available. So it's my understanding that this is a change that can be made both in Congress or administratively. And fortunately, the Deputy Attorney General during that Senate hearing did say that the Department of Justice has begun the conversation with banking regulators to address this issue. So hopefully we'll get that wrapped up. Otherwise, we're really putting these currently medical marijuana business owners, but soon to be adult use marijuana business owners at great risk. And it's needless and needs to change.
And next, I want to talk about Uruguay. They recently became the first country to create a state-run marijuana industry, fixing the price point low enough to make it unprofitable for the black market. Do you think U.S. regulations will follow along similar lines, and do you think legalization in these countries will help ease lawmakers' minds and pave the way for the U.S.?
Well, I think that the United States continues to really pave the way for countries around the world to start taking these actions. It was Colorado and Washington passing these laws to regulate marijuana this past November that really got a lot of leaders in other countries, particularly in South America and Central America, talking about this issue and asking why is it that they've been held back for years, primarily by our federal government, when now states in the U.S. are moving forward. So I think we're going to see a lot of other countries having this debate, and I think that a lot of them will continue to turn to the United States to ensure they're doing things that we approve of, because that is still a desire. There's a lot of back and forth between these countries. And, I think we will have some things to learn from them as well as we move forward. But ultimately, things are changing around the world. We're seeing medical marijuana laws being passed in European countries. We're seeing these types of broader adult use laws being passed in South American countries. And of course, here in North America, we are sure to see these laws continue to change here in the United States and hopefully very soon in Canada as well.
And last question, what kind of positive impacts would legalization have on the U.S. federal and state governments? A lot of people point to the tobacco industry and its tax revenues, but how large would the marijuana market be relatively? And are there any early indications of this potential for tax revenues from states where it's already legal, such as Colorado?
Well, there's certainly a good chance that we'll see significant revenue. It really depends on how states handle this, what types of tax rates they set. Of course, it's going to depend on whether the federal government ultimately adopts its own tax structure for these types of businesses as well. Ultimately, we are going to continue to see states adopting these laws, and we're going to watch their experiences to see whether they are generating revenue, whether they might be experiencing losses based on the amount it costs to regulate the system. I'm confident that we will at least ultimately see significant revenue. Is it going to be enough to fully fund public schools in an entire state? No, it's not. And we need to understand that. And we can't be using the hyperbole and saying that by simply taxing and regulating marijuana, we're going to solve all fiscal problems. We're not, but it's going to help, and it's going to play a very significant role and also signal a shift in how our country is handling marijuana and this type of criminal justice issue, away from spending money on drug task forces to go after marijuana grow sites, and instead invest that money in other types of programs. So it'll free those resources up. And then, of course, this is going to be an industry, it already is, that's creating jobs. In Colorado, for example, we've had a state-regulated medical marijuana industry for the last several years, and there are hundreds of these businesses, and each of them has several employees or upwards of a dozen employees or more. That's a big sector here in the state now. So we're going to continue to see that around the country, especially as more states pass these types of laws. And that's going to be what really drives Congress to address this issue, is that all of a sudden this will be an industry with tens or hundreds of thousands of employees behind it, as well as all of the millions and millions of dollars in tax revenue, and they will be forced to really listen.
Mason, that's all the questions we had time for today. Were there any other comments you wanted to add before we close?
No, that's good for me. Thanks.
Mason, thanks for your time. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and expertise. It's certainly an interesting subject area and one that is experiencing and undergoing a lot of changes right now. So we hope to visit you again in the future and get your insights.
Thank you very much for having me.
We've been talking to Mr. Mason Tvert. He's the Communications Director at the Marijuana Policy Project based in Denver, Colorado. To learn more about them, please visit their website at www.mpp.org. Thank you.